Hello, welcome back to a new video in the introduction to the Linux command line series. In this one, we're going to look at a very simple tool called type. Type is a command that allows you to figure out the type of any other command that you're working with, including itself. So in Linux, we have four types of commands. We have the shell built-in type, we have the executable type, we have the alias type, and we have the shell function type. In this video, we're going to look at all these types and explain them. If this sounds like fun, continue watching. So in Linux, every command could be one of four types. It could be an executable program. So that includes all the binaries that you may find in places like /user/bin or /bin or /sbin, etc. So those are typically C code that's compiled for your architecture and stored in there ready for you to use, like the ls command, for instance, or scripts, which is basically a script is a file, a text file that you can define. You can put in one or more commands and they get executed sequentially when you invoke that script's name. And we're going to see how to do that in a bit. So the second type is a shell built-in. Now, the shell built-in is a command that, unlike executable programs, which are files on your disk that the shell needs to go find or locate and execute, a shell built-in doesn't really require any of that. It's handled completely by the shell. Like, for instance, the cd command. So when you're in your terminal and you have a working directory, that's a concept that's maintained and tracked by your shell. It doesn't live outside the shell. So it makes sense if you're changing directory that the shell is going to handle that for you. No need for an external file or script. Make sense? So that's type number 2. So the third type that we're going to look at is a shell function. Now we're going to briefly look at it in this video. We're not going to go into too much detail, because it's going to be a topic for a future video. But know that it's a very similar concept to a script, meaning a bunch of one or more commands executed sequentially. Maybe there is F statement in there, maybe there is a looping logic in there, and very, very similar to the way that you would have a function, say, in Java or in C. This is a function that you define somewhere in your disk that usually gets loaded when the shell is started. So when you open a new terminal window, that's when that file, those dot files really are located, read, and then possibly if they contain any functions, they get stored in memory, ready for being used. So we're going to look at it briefly, but we're not going to get too much into detail. Type number 4 is an alias. So you could think of aliases as shortcuts. So I can create an alias L, let's say. That would be a shortcut for, say, ls-la. So I could define a custom command. It could be a command, it could be a shell built-in, it could be a shell function, it could be a combination of all with certain options and certain parameters, configurations. And so instead of having to type everything that you want to basically execute, you can just associate it with a letter or a word, and then that would get translated into whatever you're mapping it to. And we're going to see this now in a bit. So currently I'm in my command terminal, and I'm going to use the command type to investigate the types of commands that we've been using. So for instance, the move command, we've used the move command to move files or rename files. And if I hit enter, I get that mv is, and then it's giving me a path on the disk. So I can change the directory to /user/bin. And then if I ls mv, I see mv is there. So now going back to the picture, let's look at the cd command, shall we? So I'm going to change back to my home directory, and I'm going to type and cd. So it's saying cd is a shell built in. So it doesn't really exist on the disk as a standalone command. It's actually a command interpreted by the shell. Another command that we're going to look at is something that is aliased. And I'm going to show you how to create an alias in a bit. So the ls command, when you type in ls, if I type ls, it says ls is alias to ls -- color auto. So that's an option with a value for that option when you're executing ls. So Say that you want to create a new alias. What you do is you say alias, let's say L equals, and you say ls-la. All right. So when I type in L, I get that command executed for me. Now, one thing you want to know is, for instance, you can execute multiple commands on the same line. So there are multiple ways to doing this. One of them would be to have a semicolon after each command. So I can say change directory to root and then semicolon ls, or maybe the L that we've created. And I hit enter. And then I see that the two commands have been executed. So I can take that and make it another alias. And I would say alias root ls equals, or root L, let's say, because the original command was ls-la, which now became L as an alias. So it's root L. And if I hit enter, I'm going to change directory back into my home directory. And then I'm going to type root L, enter. And that's my alias now executing two commands with one word. So one thing I want to tell you about these aliases that we've just created is that if I type an exit, which is a command to exit the terminal, and I start my terminal again, I'm going to try and execute the command root L that we've aliased. But then I see that bash, which is the shell, is telling me command is not found. So the reason why it's not finding it is because every session, basically when it's terminated, every terminal session when it's terminated, all these aliases that were created will not be persisted. So the way to persist those commands, those aliases, and the way to define the third type, or we've looked at the executable, we've looked at the alias, we've looked at the shell built-in. We haven't looked at the shell function, which is the last one to look at. The way to define it and persist it, and to define and persist the aliases, is through the dot files associated with the shell. Let me show you what that means. So just for a bit of context, hidden files and hidden directories in Unix and Unix-like systems are directories and files that start with e dot, and they're called dot files. And basically they are hidden. See, when a file is hidden, it makes it less likely for you to delete it. So if I go in my file explorer, I see that by default, it's not showing me anything except for those two folders in my home directory. There's a lot more files. So if I Control H or view show hidden files, I see that there's a lot of hidden files. And they all start with E, with the exception of those two, they all start with E dot at the beginning. All right. So if you go to the Wikipedia page and search for dot files, you see that there are a few dot files of interest. The one that I want to bring your attention to is the bash or C. So this file is going to be loaded when your bash session is started. And notice its location is home directory. So my home directory is /home/hazem / and then dot for a hidden file, and then bash rc for a plain text file named bash rc or .bash rc. So let's define that file and see how much of a difference that makes. So I'm back in my home directory /home/hazem. I'm going to create a document, empty file. I'm going to name it bash or C. Going to define it. If you run your terminal, nothing really happens. However, let's see if we could change the content here and notice any difference. So I'm going to just put in ls, command that lists the contents of your directory. Actually, I'm also going to add maybe a new line, cd, and then go back up one level. I'm going to save that. I'm going to run my terminal. And I notice that desktop downloads have been printed, which is the result of executing ls. And then the result of executing cd ... brought me back up one level to home. So apparently, whatever you have in there is going to be sequentially executed. So this would be a very good place for me to define my aliases that I've defined earlier. So alias L equals, and then I'm going to put in there ls-la, and then the next alias I'm going to define is, was it root L equals, and I'm going to change directory to root and semicolon and then L. If I save that and go back to my terminal and I execute root L, well, it's not going to work. The reason why it's not going to work is because this file is going to be executed when you start your new, like a new shell session. So I'm going to close the shell session. I'm going to restart my terminal, which is going to start a new shell session. And if I execute root L, I get that alias executed. And if I basically close and start that again and execute L, execute root L, I get those aliases basically persisted, because every time I start a new terminal session, everything in here gets evaluated. Going back to this page, we've looked at binaries. We haven't looked at scripts yet, so we'll look at those in a bit. We looked at shell built-ins like the CD. We'll look at echo as well. So echo basically, actually, I'll just show you now. If you start a terminal session and you type in echo and you give it whatever in the text, it's going to print that for you. So apparently that's a shell built-in. It's not a dedicated command. So going back to the picture, we've looked at the shell built-ins and we've looked at the aliases, how to create them. Now we need to look at shell functions. So we're going to look first at the scripts, and then we're going to look at shell function. Okay, so to define a script, I'm going to go in my text editor. I'm going to hide hidden files and directories. I'm going to create a new empty file. I'm going to call it my script, and I'm going to give it the extension .sh. All right, so I'm going to paste the following inside the file, and I'm going to hit save. So basically, I'm going to echo lsing with ls, and then ls-la, and then I'm going to say lsing root, and then I'm going to execute ls root, lsing one level up, and then going one level up because I'm changing directory, and then echo lsing, and then it's just going to be an ls, and then I'm going to echo end, and I'm expecting that the working directory is going to change from my home directory to one level up. So let's start a terminal session, and I'm going to locate the script. I'm going to execute it with basically invoking its location, but I'm running into an issue here. It says permission denied. Now we're going to get into permissions later on down the line, but just type in chmod +x and then my script, and then repeat the previous command, which is to invoke a script. You just need to have its, basically just to type in where it is. So right now it is in the current file, in the current folder, which is a // and then the name of it. And if you hit enter, you notice that a bunch of things were executed. So let's look at what happened. lsing with ls, and then we got the ls-la executed. And if you scroll down, lsing root, and then we got just ls/ for ls and root, lsing one level up, and then we got that ls. Now I do have clion in there and C projects, and my home directory, Hazem, going one level up. So we're changing directory, and then we're lsing. So we got the same content ls again, and in end. And if I check my directory is still my home directory, because the working directory changed within the script, but it didn't change within outside of the scope of that script, which is the bash instance itself. Okay, so that's for bash scripts, very, very, very simply and briefly. What about the last thing we were going to talk about, which is the bash function? I'm going to show you how that's going to work by going back into my .files and locating the bash.rc. I can't really see it. Oh, there it is. I'm going to open that in mousepad, and I'm going to use the syntax to define a function. So I'm going to call the function my function, and that's a function. And in there, I'm going to have ls, la. I'm going to save that. And whenever I start a new session, well, nothing really happened. It wasn't, those two lines weren't executed. And the reason why they weren't executed is because there was no place they were invoked. That was just defining my function. It wasn't invoking my function. So I can invoke it by saying my function, and basically that is going to execute the ls and then the ls/li. I could take the contents of the script that we have created earlier. So open with mousepad. I'll take that content and I'm going to paste it in here, and I'm going to hit save. And now I'm going to actually close this, terminate, and start it again so that it loads the function again. And whenever I execute my function, I see that the entire, basically everything that was in the script has been executed without me having to save it in a dedicated file, locate the file, give it a permission with chmod +x, and then invoking it. I just have it in memory, ready to go. And notice one fun fact, that actually in this case, the directory changed. The current directory changed at the end of executing the function, but it didn't change when we executed the bash script. So there was a bit of a sandboxing when it comes to the current directory when you're within an execution context of a script, but not really when you're in the execution context of a bash function. Thank you for watching the video. I hope it was useful. And if you found it useful, you know what to do. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.